Hi, morning everybody, and welcome to Talking Niagara this morning on Thursday, August 29th. Hey, we're rapidly coming to the end of summer, aren't we? Our summer vacay. You know,
Yeah,
everybody's back.
yeah.
At work
Like I said,
school. Yeah, back at work and school next week. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to give bad news.
I'm making up my Christmas list right now. So I'm gonna take that
Actually,
list and spread it. Okay.
Actually, if you were thinking about corporate Christmas cards and things like that, you needed to have chosen them a couple of weeks back. Because you order them to print and, because you got to be sending them off kind of last week in November.
No, this is a list of things I want, and I'm sending it to other people to tell me these are my presents. You better get them to me.
Greedy,
I want a computer,
greedy.
I believe in the shotgun blast therapy or theory, where you just you make up a list of all the things you want, and you just shoot them out there to all your friends, and maybe one or two of them will come back your way.
Yes, sir.
Make a list of 1,000 and then just shoot them out.
Yes, sir. So I want X and I want Y and I want Z, right?
That's right.
Yeah. Okay, so the immigration minister is saying, we talked about this yesterday a little bit, but he's saying there's going to be significant changes coming down the line to permanent residency. Right? This is Immigration Minister Mark Miller, and he says the federal government is looking at a number of options about immigration and to reevaluate permanent resident levels in Canada, and says an upcoming changes will not be cosmetic. All right, it's time to
be significant, significant, not cosmetic.
Yeah. And it's time to take a look at them and put real options on the table for the Prime Minister and for other cabinet ministers to look at. Not, these are really significant change, that they're looking at in the offing. Now, it occurs to me that, of course, there's been many critics of the immigration policy. What is it? Last election, our PPC friends were major critics of the policy. Not that they were opposed to immigration, but they were opposed to the numbers of people being migrated right now.
Yeah, well, the big problem here is they're talking like conservatives right now, and the conservatives have said for a long time that the amount of immigration is not sustainable by the country.
Yeah.
And we have seen this because of, and I don't want to sound like a parrot, but it's housing and healthcare and other services that we cannot support the amount of people that are brought into the country. We bring in 1 million every year, 500,000 permanent residents through the regular immigration stream, and another 500,000 people through, I think it's even more than that, students. And what they've done is basically said, well, maybe it wasn't that all good after all. We need the immigration to keep our economy going, and they tiptoe dance around it, saying the economy says that our immigrants have done well and to help them support the economy. But now they're backtracking on that and saying, they keep saying that, of course, but they also said the next 1 million people that are coming into Canada are still going to come into Canada in the year 2025, 26, and 26. But after that, they might start slowing it down. And these are hints, and they're couching their way in which they talk, trying to make it look as if it's not the conservatives who had the idea, but they themselves.
Yeah, but again, my immigration to Canada has been on the cards for probably much of the last 25 years. And when I came in here in 2006, the immigration levels were at about 100 to 150,000 a year. And when I came in, I do have a lot of fond memories of seeing new buildings going up, new homes, new malls, new factories and things like that. You just take a drive around the country and you could see this stuff in almost any township you went into. You know, major cities, of course, you always see building projects, but I mean, smaller towns, you see building projects, right?
Well,
And I
that
thought,
was 2006 when the economy was on fire.
yeah. And I always took that as being a very positive thing because it meant the Canadian economy was going through growth. Yeah, 2006 exactly. Canadian economy was doing exceedingly well. And the thing is that I think that you have to kind of change your levels of immigration according to how well the economy is going. When the economy is in a bad state, you don't want to be bringing people in. You don't want new immigrants taking jobs for people who've been looking, uh, you know, Joe says, "Hey, I've been looking for a job for 3 years now. I haven't found a damn thing. All these new immigrants are coming in, taking my job at half my wage." You know, we know that a lot of that statement isn't true, but it's the public image of that possibility, right?
Well, the temporary foreign workers, obviously, they've woken up to the fact that in fact, Trudeau, using conservative talking points again, has said, well, now it's time for the employers to invest in Canadians. We're going to cut back the temporary worker program.
Yeah.
Well, that has a kind of a consequence in a couple of different ways. I mean, it's a good thing that they came across that as they did. But meanwhile, the damage is being done to a lot of people. Those people are trying to get into low wage jobs because normally those are the ones that the temporary foreign workers take. So the temporary foreign workers get less than, of course, they then would be preferred by many employers because they pay them less and they have less responsibilities towards those workers than they would for a native born Canadian. And the fact is that this is a way in which they can get away with paying less than minimum wage. So finally the Liberal government got on top of that, and they said they used the excuse they couldn't fill a whole lot of jobs after the pandemic. But they didn't regulate. They didn't see what was going on. I mean, there had to be a crisis before they. I mean, somebody should have said, okay, well, maybe we need some temporary foreign workers for a year or something like that, and then we have to hold back on that. But nobody ever thought the second thing, like, what do we do next? So we get a wave of temporary workers for now, and then stop the program. But they didn't. They had to come under a lot of public pressure in order to do that. Now, this particular article has attached to it a CTV reporter, a political reporter, and she's really good. She had Mark Miller on the ropes in the interview. And it was a really good interview, man. He could not dodge and weave or anything. But to his own credit, he stood there and took it. She chewed apart in a professional and polite way the government's immigration policy and what to do. Now, he is just saying, these are the things I'm going to propose to Prime Minister Trudeau and the cabinet. But what he has said is basically the next wave of 1 million legal immigrants are going to come in, and they have reduced the amount of students and temporary foreign workers. But that's not enough. Another 1 million people will strain the resources of Canada incredibly.
Yeah. And as I said, it's not about the immigrants, but it's about the fact that when your economy's in bad shape, you have to consider those people that are already here, and consider them first.
Well, we have to step back to 2015, and Trudeau and his government said, okay, we're going to bring in way more immigrants. We want our objective is to have 30% of the country not born here to come in here. There's Metaphysical Mike. Hi, Metaphysical has just joined the show. So basically they had this ideal and they talked about diversity and all these other idealistic things, and we're going to bring people in from all over the world, and 30% of our people by 2030 are going to be born outside of the country, and that was supposed to be really wonderful. At the same time, they said they had a housing initiative which they never fully implemented, hardly at all. Started 2015, but they never got started with it until the conservatives started making political points by pointing it out. Now all of a sudden they're running around the country trying to hand money away. The problem is you cannot build houses that fast. Yeah, and you build 200,000 houses and you bring 1.5 million people in.
Yeah, the equation doesn't work. Yeah,
and it drives up the prices of the homes.
Not when you consider that there's, if you bring in 1 million people into the place, you need, on average, you need 500,000 homes for them to move into, right?
Seriously, yeah. And
you can't build homes, and you certainly can't build 1 million homes in a year, right? We'd be hard pushed to build 200,000 in a year.
And it really isn't clear to me, if you got 500,000 immigrants coming in, does that include their families? Are they including their families?
No, that would be including families. I take that as including families. So the million immigrants includes a number of single people and a number of people who bring their families along. So that's why I'm saying you need if you've got 1 million people coming in, you need half that number of homes, right? Because I'm talking about the family size when they're coming in being about 2 people per family.
Yeah. So what Mark Miller has done here in the article, he has said that they're going to have some real tough issues being spoken of, and he's going to have to present it to the government, and they're going to have, and basically what he hints around is they're going to have to reduce the number of residents coming into the country. Meanwhile, he's got to protect the liberal policy up until this point. And he has to say it's a wonderful thing. We did a great job, but now there's a new reality. And Canadians are asking us to do this, and Canadians are asking us to do that. The Canadians have been asking them to do a lot of things up until now, and which they've completely ignored. Now, this has been an issue with Canadians for a long time, and they've just snubbed the Canadians because they have the power of government. Yeah.
The Liberals have been on a journey which is we know better than you.
Yes, exactly. And I like to use that term myself. We know better than you. I've seen this in just about even in union politics when I was involved in union politics, and anywhere where the power is unassailable, where it's safe, they come up with their ideas, and any kind of resistance to it, they pretty much say that in one way or another. We know better than you. We know better than you that we should bring 500,000 immigrants in every year. We know better than, and if you say, well, what are they going to put houses in? What about our healthcare system? We know better than you. It'll be fine, And then they do the racist thing, which is appalling, because as soon as somebody starts saying something about limiting immigration, when they limit immigration, that's a lot. That's immigration from everywhere in the world, Africa, Asia, Europe, wherever. And when you start to talk about limiting the amount of immigrants in, one of the things that liberals like to do before is just say, oh, you're racist. That's the racist that's coming out of you. No, how about that's not the right. You can't make that claim when the reasons for limiting immigration is so that we can catch up in housing and healthcare.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Exactly. And it's nobody in making those statements. I've never heard about if you wind the clock back to, let's say, the 1960s in Britain, there were many statements about limiting immigration. And the limiting immigration statements that were made back in the 60s in Britain were, we don't want, were along the lines of, we don't want colored people coming into Britain. There's already too many of them here. Those were the types of statements. That's an entirely different type of statement. That's entirely racist, right? I've not heard anybody say anything to do with race in these. Nobody's saying we want to limit immigration. Oh, Europeans only. No, that statement's not being made. The statement we're hearing is that the economic situation cannot sustain the current migration levels, and therefore we have to cut back, and that means cut back on everybody.
Yeah, it's pretty much the number of immigrants, not the race of those immigrants. I mean, if you've got somebody from the Congo who is a doctor or a investment banker or just maybe even an engineer or something like that, and he comes from the Congo, that's the guy you want. He's got a skill. He's got a skill base.
Yeah.
My brother's neighbors are from Nigeria. They think they're engineers too. I mean, they
well,
got a high. They're right beside them, and they're a high skill base.
And that's the kind of person you want, rather than a road sweeper from London, right?
Yeah, a road sweeper from any kind of color, or any kind of background.
Yeah.
So we can get road sweepers. We might not be able to get enough engineers.
Yeah, exactly.
We may not get enough carpenters, or maybe even electricians, or something like that, wherever they might come from. And it could be it could be the Congo, it could be Nigeria, it could be Vietnam, whatever. But the number, we gotta come down to the number. How many do we need, and who do we need? Right now, we need carpenters and electricians and that kind of thing in order to build homes and apartments.
Yeah.
We also need the engineers, maybe, to help, civil engineers to go along with that. Yeah. And it takes a lot of time for them to integrate into society too. They just don't walk off the airplane and then get a job, start installing windows in a newly built house. So that there is time that it takes, even if you say, okay, well, we're gonna fix our housing problem by bringing in a lot of people to build houses. You can't integrate them that fast enough to really put them to work that fast to build houses for an outsized immigration population that's coming in. It was a bad idea by the government of Canada. They were running on idealistic fervor. Oh, wouldn't it be wonderful to have a diverse universe? But yeah, it would. But you got to do it the way it is sustainable. And Mark, if you ever look at that article, the CTV news reporter, she's good. She was polite. She did what she was supposed to do, and she was not biased in any way. And she just hit him with tough question after tough question. And he was he found it difficult to answer and give a satisfactory answer. However, he did try. So hats off to both the interviewer especially, but also the interviewee. Mark Miller didn't run away. He stood there and took it.
Yeah, and she points out the biggest issue here is that Canada's housing supply has not kept pace with rent increases recent increases in immigration. Yeah. I didn't say rent. I said rent increases. I meant recent increases in immigration. And that's part of the problem. You can, if you can't build the houses fast enough, you can't bring the people in.
Now, another article we got here, which relates to this, is thousands of international students in Canada face deportation, sparking protests. That's a City News one, and it is it's not the next one in line, but the one afterwards. And that relates to that. That's why I'm bringing this one up. So you have a lot of students now have come into the country, and they're now protesting, saying that you waved the carrot in front of us, and now you're telling us we have to go home. We've come here, we've done our studies, we've worked, and now the federal government says we got to go home. So Canada is currently witnessing the countrywide protest of more than 70,000 international student graduates that could face deportation due to the federal policy changes and the unprecedented number of students who came to the country with dreams of a new life say their futures are now in limbo. Now, this is a consequence of not thinking first. Yeah. Now we have a lot of students coming to the country, and they rightly have expected their dreams to come true, because this is pretty much what they had been promised, or at least thought they were promised, that once you come here, get an education, then that was a fast track into becoming a citizen, a resident of Canada. And that's what they were, that was a big reason why they spent all of their fathers and grandmothers and grandfathers' savings to come here to get an education. And now the government's saying, no, your expectations were overbounded. Not so, really, because most of the other students throughout this administration who's come into Canada have made an easier way of getting back into the country. It is thought to be a fast track or a better way to getting into the country and becoming a permanent resident. Now they're all terrified. They're gonna, like, so many of them are gonna get deported and get not really deported, but asked to go back to the country. They're not going to be granted residency status.
But again, international students, there's a general thing. Whilst I know that probably in the post-war years, there's been a general thing that, hey, you go study abroad, nobody expects you to come home. But that never really was the intent of international students. The intent of international students is that you would send people to foreign universities, because those foreign universities offered, higher level degrees, or were seen with some reverberation locally, and that you would come back and bring those foreign skills back here to your homeland.
Yes. Well, at one time, that was the idealistic idea: bring foreign students in, and they then will go back to their country and improve that country. What normally would happen is the foreign student would come here and stay here. And whether that foreign student came from Britain, or if they came from Upper Volta, or which is now called Burkina Faso, it didn't really matter. So if they got here and they did well in their studies, that was a fast track into the country. And that's just the truth of it. But right now, because it's changed now, the universities are making a huge amount of money off of foreign students, and that's private. And the worst players here are the private universities, some of them which are called diploma mills.
Yeah.
But the public universities are at fault too.
And Mike is pointing out is that they're basically giving genetic letters and, essentially facilitating illegal entry.
Well, a lot of them, as we've talked about on this show before, they have agents. Like there are companies basically, or agencies in other countries, and the ones that I've seen mostly are the ones that are in India, where a poor guy who's trying to get into Canada can go to this agency, and they say, look, what you got to do is go in as a student. So we'll find you a place and we'll doctor up your application, and you go in as a student. And once you're over there, you're good. That's how we're going to get you into the country.
Yeah.
Now there's lots of people that want to genuinely study here. As a matter of fact, I told a story of a Palestinian guy I knew who wanted to get his brother into Canada because there was no there was no opportunity even back then in the early 80s for Palestinians in the West Bank. And so he's trying to get his brother into Canada and just get him in. That's basically what he was trying to. Once we get him in, that's good. And I said, well, his marks are terrible. He hasn't really got good marks. He hasn't got whatever. And his idea is once we get him out of here, well, it was in Libya at the time, but what he meant is once we get him out of Palestine and into Canada, then everything's okay. Once he's there, that's it. We just got to get him there. And so we'll get him in as a student. And that was back in the 80s. So that idea hasn't really changed, except that it's got much more sophisticated. Yeah. It's a way of making money off of these poor chumps. We're going to need about $10,000, and we'll get you into Canada. We know the forms and papers to sign out, and we'll get you accepted in some university by doctoring up your particulars here. And once you're in Canada, then you're golden. But that may have been the case. But a lot of these students here, I'm pretty sure they're just going to disappear into the ether, basically, and start living in people's basements and start driving Ubers.
We talked about people who finished their programs, done very well in their programs, but yet have got no hope of getting their immigration papers. The jobs that they've got expiring in months, and no hope they're going to get to stay. Right? We talked about that in the past.
Yeah, and this is the consequence of the government policy too. Now, they have the consequence of that is to give false hope, or at least there was more positive hope that these students would stay in Canada thereafter, but because they overdid it and didn't control the amount of students coming in and didn't watch it carefully enough, now they're going to have to tell all these students who had high expectations, well, guess what? Things have changed. You came in a little bit too late. If you come in 5 years ago, you would have been able to stay, but not now. You got to go. And because we got too many of you, so you got to scram. And they say, well, wait a minute. Like, we've done everything. We're trying to go along the point system. We're trying to establish our point system so we can say it, because they have a point system for people to stay. So I got my education. I'm doing everything on this list of point systems to make sure I can stay. I found out a couple of days ago that you got all kinds of refugees and other people in places where they need volunteers, because that would be another good point for them to be able to stay. Is once they come in, or students, they go everywhere they can to try to volunteer and help somewhere, some way, to establish a better, to get those points that are required, because that's somewhere on the list. If you volunteer or become part of the community, engage in the community, that's one way to do it, and that's one of the points. So that, unfortunately, they think they have been playing along by the rules. They've been led astray by the policy of Canada, and now suddenly Canada says, "Oh, well, we got way too many." Why was it so sudden? They didn't see this coming. This has been something that's been put out there for a very long time, and that's why when Mark Miller here, the immigration minister, that's why he is couching it in the ways that he is. We are going to do something not cosmetic. We're going to do something significant. Yeah. We are listening to the Canadians. No, well, they haven't. They're listening to they're listening to the polls to say that conservatives are making points on these issues.
Yeah, let's hear what the significant things are, and let's move it from there. All right, we're going to move on to our next thing. When you can talk about this one, no end in sight for the wars in Sudan and Congo. I can't get this article.
Yeah, I should have found a different variation of this. This is from the Globe and Mail. Really much, I've said before that the African continent and it is awash in war. It was kind of like Europe back in the 1700s, basically, or early 1800s. War. Congo, Sudan. There are the M23 rebels that are supported by Rwanda, and they are a leftist group. That's a kind of a blast from the past, isn't it? A leftist insurgency group, not a Islamic one for a change. Anyway, they are fighting in the Congo, and they're supported by Rwanda. I don't really what else to say about this. These are intransigent conflicts. They don't seem to have a solution.
Well, yeah. Sudan and Congo are not next to one another. That's another thing to geographically point out. Sudan is south of Egypt. Congo is in West Africa.
Well, Congo is right in Central Africa, the lower part of it. It takes of course, the Congo River, of which the country is around, empties into the Atlantic Ocean, but it's a big country sitting centrally in the part of Africa that is the southern part. It's Sudan.
So it's not like these are two neighbors. Sudan and Congo are not two neighbors. They're not neighboring countries, right?
No, they're not neighboring countries. And I don't know. They're, of course, separate conflicts.
Yeah.
But I think the article was basically just saying, the futility of trying to get peace. And we found this out when I reported on what we reported here on the show about Mali and Burkina Faso and the problems they're having. And of course, up there, they're having problems like in Sudan. It's an ethnic strife that's going on, Arabs versus indigenous people, basically, or the black people in some cases, and in the West, it's Mali and Burkina Faso, and it's Islamic insurgencies that's causing the problem, and dictatorial military governments. I don't really know. We focus on Gaza and Ukraine. Well, Gaza is a misery case right now. I don't know if the Israelis are doing the same thing in the West Bank now as they were doing in Gaza. Sort of you're going to destroy everything possible. They definitely want the people to get out if they could possibly expel them. But in any case, that's another subject. But I just put there to make sure that people are made aware of these conflicts that are ongoing, and it's just, and if you think, well, they're killing each other, there's nothing much I can do about it. But the fact of the matter is, it affects our world economy. It does. Every one of these wars has a reverberation throughout the world economy, and if left unattended, they can really explode into bigger conflicts.
Yeah. Well, and actually, that's an interesting thing about you saying how it affects the economy, because that's where our next article goes, right?
Okay.
Where basically Israeli tech companies are finding that it's directly tied to the Gaza war. Money has dried up. Startups are folding one after another, and they're either closing or significantly reducing their activity because they just can't get going, with the current, with current war going on in Gaza.
Yeah, this is the death knell for a lot of Israeli startups, and Israeli startups are one of the things. One of the encouraging things in the Israeli economy was their ability to have these tech startups.
Yeah,
of course they are well-educated, well-funded country. They're well funded by the U.S. and the West, basically, but they have been doing very well. However, this particular war in Gaza right now is the thing that has really put a damper on it. So this is another consequence of this war, is these startups and these new companies and stuff are just going flat. It might as well have been another COVID coming on when you're trying to start a business.
Yeah. Well, the point about it is, of course, if you happen to be starting a business and you were making weapons, armaments, etc., you might do exceedingly well out of it. But if you're trying to do something that isn't part of the war machine, then it will be exceedingly challenging.
And to be fair, this predates the war. There has been a lot of social unrest in Israel right now, particularly when Netanyahu tried to change the legal system. And he tried to control the legal system. It didn't work for him, but that caused a lot of internal strife. And as you remember, the streets of Israel full of protesters when Netanyahu, because Netanyahu was always in trouble with the law and the courts, and he's tried to control the courts. It didn't work. He lost. His party's initiative lost by 1 vote, and so it didn't work. It didn't work. But he's going to try again. So there's all this unrest going on. There's also a hard right push in Israel right now, where the right wing of the party and the extreme right wing is now controlling things, because they're the ones that hold the balance of power. So Smotrich and guys like Ben Gvir and that, they're the ones that are calling the shots, which is upsetting to any outside investor that might want to come in and help along. Plus the fact that prior to this, Israeli companies that have produced things and come out to the West to sell them haven't done so well lately. I'm not talking about the startups, the tech startups. I'm talking more about other companies.
Yeah, exactly. And there was a time when I remember kind of think, well, we had some, I saw some presentations one time by tech startups out of Israel, and what they had was amazing new technology. Right.
Well, of course, they're sources of the United States. Obviously.
But again, a lot of these were they're tech startups. Their teams were not just Israelis, but were Arabs and Palestinians, and they were a multicultural team. Well,
they're going to pick the best talent, aren't they?
Of course.
If the best talent is a one-eyed green blob from Mars. Welcome.
Yeah, exactly. That's the guy.
If it's an alien that looks like a giant dung beetle, but he really knows how to kiss the keys with his little flippers and do it well, yeah, that's the guy.
Yeah,
I'll hire him.
Yeah, and that's the point. Is when back in the day when Israeli tech companies included a lot of that, they got a lot of attention, and for the right reasons.
Well, yeah, you got to remember the heavy funding that was coming from the States. Until Obama came, not only did they get Israel get $3 billion worth of military aid, they also got $3 billion worth of economic aid. Obama stopped that because it was unnecessary. Israel had an economy that it could run itself. It didn't need the extra $3 billion from the United States, but it still has international. One of the things that probably, and I haven't really looked it up, is a thing called international Jewry, which means Jews from all over around the world will support things that are happening in Israel, and that would be true mostly from the United States. Who have a profound interest in making sure that Israel has a viable economy of its own because of their sort of political and religious beliefs. Yeah, that's been going on since the beginning of Zionism. Zionism was supported by Jews from other places when they began, and that I don't think that has changed. Plus the governments of allied governments like the United States, but but it had produced results. And right now, because of the war and the political turmoil that's happening in Israel, so these companies, these young startups, are not getting their due chance.
Yeah.
And what was supposed to happen here was the Abrahamic Accords, where Saudi Arabia, Oman, the Dubai, Qatar, and all these others supposed to have eventually got a regional trade deal between them all. And that regional trade deal was supposed to be beneficial for all the countries in the region. As we remember, Saudi Arabia was almost going to sign on to that deal until the war happened, and then it couldn't after that. It would have an internal revolution.
And the whole thing here is the Financial Times, London's Financial Times, published figures from Carter data, which basically indicated that, I hate that when they do that, that there was a 60% increase. There was a 60% closure of tech companies.
Yes, and as I said before, the Abrahamic Accords were supposed to bring a trade deal, a sort of a mutually beneficial trade deal between Israel and its Arab neighbors. The Arab neighbors had the resources, particularly oil, but other things, and Israel had the technical expertise. So it was going to be like pretty much the trade deal that we have similarly between Mexico, U.S., and Canada, sort of a free trade. And like Israel is supposed to be doing the engineering and the electronics and all that other stuff, whereas the Arab countries had the resources, but not the technical sophistication. So it was supposed to be a win-win situation, but they didn't figure on. They forgot about the Palestinian situation, and that blew up in their face. And
so basically what I was saying, it was a 60% rise in startup bankruptcies, right?
You could have seen if the Abrahamic Accords was set to go ahead and Saudi Arabia did sign on to it, and then there was no October 7th, these startups would have been telling a different story.
Yeah, absolutely, they would have done. Yeah, absolutely. Right. And the worst of it is when we say tech startups, we, often people think about computer programs, and that's part of it, but it's not all of it.
I should say the Abrahamic Accords have gone ahead, but the trade, the trade and inter economy thing has not gone ahead. It has only gone ahead minorly because of the Palestinian thing. It has never completed. Some of the Arab nations have signed on with trade deals with Israel, but the big one, of course, is Saudi Arabia, and it was stopped from doing that because of the Palestinian war, the war that's going on now, and will likely never sign on because of the brutality of the Israeli government.
And to have gotten the Saudis this close to doing a deal with the Israelis, a nation they didn't even recognize until recently, that was a significant step in the right direction for some form of peace and economic accord in the Middle East.
That was supposedly part of the reason why Hamas did the attack. It saw this happening, and it felt that once the Saudis looked the other way on them and took a side with Israel for economic reasons, they were toast. So that was part of the supposedly part of the reason why they made the attack on October 7th, which is still a mystery. Why did and I'll bring this up here too. Why did how was it they were able ever to succeed to get through the fence and get through all the monitoring and the Israeli intelligence saw them practicing for a couple of years, and so did the Egyptians, and all these warnings were out there, and all of a sudden the fences were left pretty much unattended, and the garrison wasn't just sleeping basically. nothing much was happening there. And I will also point out that a great deal of the damage that happened on October 7th was not so much Hamas, it was the Palestinians that followed them in that weren't part of the Hamas brigades. They were Palestinians coming in and looting, and they were some of the ones that did a lot of the murdering. So these things are becoming clearer all the time. However, what you have now is you had 1,200 people killed in October 7th, many of them killed by friendly fire, and you have now over 40,000. So you pretty much got 40 times as many victims in Palestine, and the damage is, I don't know. And they're attacking West Bank now. They're doing the same thing in the West Bank. They're destroying roads in West Bank. They're bringing in bulldozers and ripping up roads and blocking roads and saying that they're raiding it because they feel the Iranians have sold weapons there. It's might be partially true, but not. It doesn't. What they're doing is basically trying to move people out the same way they're doing in Gaza, pushing them from one side of the country to the other side of the country. I don't know. Any case, I don't see the startups in Israel doing well. And I put that article in there because of the economic consequences of a war. I don't know how long it will take Israel to recover. It will obviously get a mass cash infusion from the States somewhere along the line. But it still has consequences, and it's retarded the growth of the Israeli economy. And we have no one else to blame but ourselves because we haven't solved the Palestinian issue, have we? And of course, it's going to keep erupting. You can't keep people like that without them getting radicalized.
And you cannot, massacre isn't going to help.
No, it's not. We're supposed to be the good guys. We're watching this happen all day long. And what do we say? Oh, we shouldn't do it. Here's some more bombs. Oh, no, don't do that. Here's some more bombs. Hey, you got enough bullets? I don't want you to use them, but here's a big box of bullets.
Yeah. All right. Moving on. Iran's supreme leader opens the door to negotiations with the U.S. over Tehran's nuclear policy. This is Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who's basically looking to clear the red lines for talking with the US about their nuclear program. Although his words are is being rejected by President Masoud
Pezeshkian. Yeah, but President Pezeshkian is a much more moderate president than the previous one, and this is very unusual because you can almost read between the lines here. You notice that Iran has not attacked Israel like it says it was going to, and it's probably holding on for a couple different reasons. Originally, it said it would not respond. If it did, it might prolong the war that's going on in Gaza. So that's one reason why they might withhold their revenge. Another reason here, we can read between the lines, is the United States may have held out a couple of olive branches for it. The United States has kept saying over and over again, if Iran responds, it will escalate the situation. It's long been thought that the Israelis are playing the U.S. and trying to get the Iranians to respond so that the United States is forced to protect Israel. As we know, many of its warships and submarines have come into the area as a threat to Iran if you retaliate. Now, behind the scene, of course, the Iranians are saying, well, what do you expect us to do? They killed the chief negotiator of Hamas right here. He's a political, not a military aspect of the Hamas movement, kind of like Jerry Smith was the political voice of the IRA in Northern Ireland. Well, he was a political voice, not a militant voice or not a military voice of Hamas. And they killed that guy. You would think they would have killed somebody who had more blood in their hands, but they didn't. And he was a chief negotiator, so it was obvious they want to interrupt the ceasefire plans.
Yeah.
They have been trying to get the United States to attack Iran for years. When they were attacking Iraq, they came out, the Saudi Arabia and Israel wanted the United States to include Iran in this as well, so that they can get rid of all their enemies in the area. Now, but it didn't work. And what they want Iran to do is fire back so that they can escalate the situation. And the United States probably would be deterred from pushing them to a peace deal and all that other stuff. It's not working, basically. The Iranians aren't stupid, so they're trying to figure out what the Israelis have. They've done this this thing that they know that the Iranians are going to get mad about. Anybody would. Imagine if you had a negotiator in Ottawa, maybe a FARC negotiator or something like that, somebody coming in, and the Colombian government blew them up right there in Ottawa. Well, Ottawa would be pretty mad. So it's the same sort of thing. However, you can read behind the lines, and there's another thing that's going on there. Not only this reopening of the nuclear deal at this particular time seems outrageous.
Yeah. In a way, yes, it does. But I also get it. Look, hey, the other thing is that Ayatollah Ali Khamenei is actually 85 years old, so he's getting on in years. And I'm wondering whether what he's looking at is a longer term legacy.
Possibly, but he may have a situation there where he can negotiate with the Americans. Because if the Americans get in a more protracted war, if this escalates, the United States is extremely in debt right now and extremely overburdened. They can't make enough munitions for both Israel and Ukraine. And the Ukraine thing looks, if the Democrats win anyway, it's going to go on and on and on. It's going to be another forever war. So the United States has other problems, and one of them is China, and they have to keep an eye on that. I mean, right now China owns the second largest owner of their debt, which puts them in a pretty bad situation there. If China dumps all its debt all of a sudden, that would throw a reverberation through the economy of the United States. So it is in a very vulnerable position. It really can't afford to have another war. I mean, it would obliterate Tehran, no other ifs, ands, or buts about that. But it's costly. And there are other problems in the world, China mainly being the one. Do you really want to exhaust your resources when China is really the number one issue you should be looking at, and the independence of Taiwan? You don't want Taiwan to fall under the hands of China. And how can you do that when you're fighting Iran and Ukraine and feeding Israel all the bombs it needs to murder Palestinians?
Yeah, in fact, all the more reason for the US to get out of Israel or Gaza.
Yeah, really. I don't really even understand why we are supporting Israel to the degree of which we are.
Yeah,
I mean, they're not a nice player. They have subjugated people. They are now trying to steal their land. They're treating them horribly, and so it's I don't know. I don't know what really happened here, but in any case, Iran, in a most unusual. When I read that article, I almost fell off my chair. Iran wants to renegotiate with the West about its nuclear plant. How do you think it will ever get anywhere?
Yeah, part of this is the International Atomic Energy Authority had surveillance cameras inside many of the Iranian nuclear power stations, and now many of those surveillance cameras were actually interrupted. They've not been surveilling properly.
No, because Trump pulled out of the deal. The deal was a very, very good deal. I thought it was one of the highest accomplishments of the Obama administration. What it did, Obama's administration got together with the Russians, the Chinese, and whoever else. I forget how many participants there was. Nobody wanted Iran to get a nuclear bomb because they didn't want any. If any, they were in a very hot zone in the world, and they don't want bombs going off, whether accidentally or whatever. So if you make sure that they don't have a bomb, and you give them some kind of assurances. What the deal was, we'll introduce you back into the world economy if you run your nuclear program and don't enrich uranium to weapons grade. And they had the advantage too here because religiously, the Shia Muslim authority in Iran has an objection towards nuclear bombs. They have a religious idea that they shouldn't be created. I forget how best to. I've heard the Khomeini talk about, not heard it, but read what he had said, that they find them repugnant and they find them un-Islamic to have a bomb of that.
I've heard that. I've heard that said by the Sunni, not the Sunni. I mean the Shiite Muslims have said that before multiple times.
Yeah, and this is the top brass, the main leader, the supreme leader, and his associated imams. So they have a repugnance towards having it, a repugnance towards using it. It is way too destructive for their. You remember, their Muslims are not. All Muslims aren't like ISIS. Muslims.
I know exactly, and remember, it's quite a difference between using nuclear for providing energy than using nuclear for making weapons.
Yeah, so that was the deal.
It may only be a small few percentage points, but it's that few percentage points that matter. And when you have a leadership that actually doesn't want to go those extra percentage points, maybe that makes all the difference.
Yeah. So what they did is they came up with a deal. We try to integrate you back in the economy slowly, in the world economy slowly. We'll keep an eye on your nuclear thing so we can use it for domestic use. Because let's face it, your country's going to need power, and one of the best ways to make power is by nuclear reactors. It's once they're built, they last for a very long time, and they produce a lot of power. And if you don't have waterfalls or other means of producing it, now they have a lot of gas and oil and stuff, but of course, if they use that, it's very polluting. And the city of Tehran right now apparently is a pollution nightmare just by the cars. So you can imagine if a power plant was plunked in there, which they probably do have some, but I don't know. It's a dodgy thing. I thought the Obama government came up with a very good solution there, because we know that they can't get away with making their uranium weapons grade with all the surveillance they had on the Iranians. Now Trump came along and he just pulled a pin on that, which motivated them to make weapons grade uranium. And you think, well, why would they want weapons grade uranium? Well, it's because Israel has a bomb, right? And so they should have a bomb as a deterrent. But what nobody talks about is their friction with Pakistan. Pakistan's on their southern border. Pakistan is an unstable Sunni government, which houses a lot of Sunni extremists, the Taliban and ISIS and all other things. If they ever get into power, they've got Pakistan's nuclear weapon at their disposal. And who's their neighbor? Are the Shiites, who are a heresy to the ISIS and
Yeah.
Al Qaeda and the Sunnis. So you can see, and as you might recall, just a month or so ago, they had an exchange of missiles going across the border of Pakistan. When Tehran looks at their survival, it's looking south as much as it's looking west. It's looking south to Pakistan, where you have a Sunni-driven insurgency, an unstable government with a government that has a bomb.
Yeah. All right. And I think kind of we've come to the point whereby we've come to the end of our show today, really, time-wise. We've got other things, but we're going to have to pick up on those tomorrow.
Yes, everyone, and
more local tomorrow. Okay.
We'll try to steer it more local. I get so frustrated with these international things, but I have to keep up on them, because if you don't, you'll get flim-flammed by our own government or whatever. Why are you giving Israel massive amounts of weapons and saying don't do it? And why are you Canada's channeling their weapons to Israel via the United States and saying, well, we're not supplying? These are things you got to keep up on. So anyway, without further ado, I bid you pray for peace.